Good people of Los Angeles, welcome back to the Season Pass podcast. I'm here with Josh Gross and Ryan Wallerson. The three of us are braving the heat. We're recording this on Thursday afternoon, a couple hours removed from LAFC's first digital press conference for a home game. They will be playing the Galaxy at an empty Bank of California Stadium on Saturday. We're going to get you up to speed on all the details that have happened between the last match in Orlando and preview this Galaxy game. But first, I think I owe everyone in our Season Pass audience and my two co-hosts an acknowledgement that I was very wrong about MLS being able to pull off that tournament. I did not see it going all the way through. I thought that was an extremely unlikely possibility. And so I got to give credit where credit's due in the fact that they were able to pull it off. And again, we lost the two teams early, Nashville and Dallas. After that, they were able to have the full tournament. So I'm sure we all enjoyed it. I'm sure the listeners enjoyed it. And we know that the players, who haven't been playing since March, got a chance to actually play real games that meant something. And Portland, of course, won the tournament against the team that knocked out LAFC, the host Orlando. But guys, I first just want to get both of your kind of takes and what you felt about the tournament overall, and then we'll dive into just that last game with Orlando before breaking down some LAFC news.
The entire tournament from the standpoint of LAFC or overall?
Ryan, you were in Florida. You can talk about whatever you want.
I mean, yeah, I kind of just have to second the notion because I didn't disagree with you and your skepticism that the tournament would be able to, be completed with as little as a hitch as possible after what we saw with Nashville and with Dallas. But, to credit to the league that they were able to keep the tests all positive, no negative testing after that early stage snafu. And then, the quality of the football, I think, peaked towards the middle of the tournament and towards the end. I think you saw the team that's able to kind of play conservatively and absorb pressure the best in Portland, and the team most comfortable in the climate of the location, Central Florida, Orlando, make it to the final. And then obviously Portland's style won out over Orlando's home field advantage. But all in all, I think that it was a victory for MLS, and now we move back into the regular season. For LAFC specifically, I think that the offense answered a lot of questions for how well it would perform without Carlos Vela, but you saw some defensive issues that the team didn't have as much of last year in setting that league record goal differential. The midfield played as you would expect for LAFC. I think most of the questions moving into the regular season restart are on the defensive line and with the goalkeeping because they went back and forth between Vermeer and Cistiega. But up front, I think LAFC saw exactly what they wanted to see, and they're boosted now by the return of the MLS MVP. And, on they go. I think restarting fourth in the Western Conference and still very much within the playoff picture.
Josh, what were your overall thoughts about the tournament and how everything proceeded for LAFC?
Yeah, well, I think for LAFC, you can kind of call it a wash. I think it was disappointing. They were a couple minutes away from being the one seed out of their group. They lost that. They were a couple minutes away from advancing into the semis. They lost that. And you can say, they didn't have Carlos Vela, but still I think they showed their talent throughout and, the depth and all those sorts of things that they have that they bring onto the pitch every time they step out there. So, in terms of the expectations of the club and everything, going out in the quarters, not the best. They didn't show up in the end against the two teams that end up in the finals. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know how you feel about losing to the two finalists, losing to the eventual champion if you're LAFC or not. I thought on the whole, like you said, MLS did a solid job of keeping this thing intact. I think the logistics are insane to get it done, especially at a time, just a month ago, but it feels like 15 months ago. And, the kind of wrapping this up and figuring it out and getting it done and crowning a champion and then getting the teams where they can go back home and actually play some in front of fans, I think is wild. But, It maybe wasn't the big splash that MLS was hoping for. I don't know from a viewership perspective that it did especially well. But I think if you care about the league and you wanted to watch some competitive soccer, you probably walked away and felt like it was overall a good experience. I think there's reasons, probably more reasons than less, to feel positive about it. And now we'll see how this works out in stadiums and teams are in their own environments and out of the bubble, whether they can actually pull it off or not.
And just to sort of recap for people how LAFC got bounced from the tournament, they did end up losing in penalties to Orlando. Ryan always says there's no justice in penalties. When I think back on that game and how they exited, yes, there was the exhaustion. Yes, there was the fact that the game was like, I think one of the earliest ones, if not the earliest one LAFC played the whole tournament. There was like, it was one of the hottest days. There's all these like other factors. They had less rest. You could see the fatigue on the field. But yeah, as Josh just brought up, they were ahead. And of course, Joao Moutinho, LAFC's former number 1 pick in the expansion draft, entering their first season that they traded to Orlando for Mohamed El Munir, ended up scoring the leveler. They go to 1-1. They go straight to penalties. I think he scored that goal in the 90th minute.
He did.
And, you know, I remember the left back position. I sort of think of this as the game of the left back because if you recall, Chiqui Palacios, LAFC's left back, had a really tough game that day. You could tell he was one of the players that really seemed to not be at his best, seemed exhausted. He was the one that gave up the penalty, which Kenneth Vermeer then saved. And then, of course, he was replaced by Jordan Harvey later in the game. And Jordan, I think, who got his only minutes in the tournament, if I remember correctly, he struggled as well and just didn't look to be that sort of like ageless wonder that we had seen over the last 2 seasons in just a solid role for LAFC. And so Mohamed El Munir, for example, didn't get into the game. Jordan ended up missing his penalty. He was the penalty that was missed for LAFC. Joao Moutinho ended up making it. It seemed like so much was focused, so much of the key action was focused in that position in this game. And without like reading too much into it, given the fact that Chiqui is such a strong player, I do remember always thinking that LAFC had so much depth at left back. So I found it kind of ironic that was the position where they found a lot of, you know, vulnerabilities in themselves during this match. I mean, did you guys have any tactical or positional or any other sort of insights to draw from how they were bounced or things that you guys remember from that specific game? We can quickly hit before we get into news.
It's tough to lament on, you know, how they performed in the full 90 because obviously LAFC had never gone a half without putting a shot on goal, and Orlando City held them for an hour without any such effort until Bradley Wright Phillips finally scored LAFC's lone goal on their first shot on goal, their first shot of any kind in that game. But the fact is that in the 90th minute, they were approaching extra time, nursing that 1-0 lead for as exhausted as they are. I thought that they put out a really gritty, gutsy effort on defense where their offense clearly did not have it after scoring 15 goals over the first 4 matches. I think you kind of knew, if not knew, certainly can't count it against the offense to have an off night for whatever the reason, given that the offense is pretty much what carried the team to that point. And I thought that my entire story was written. You know, LAFC's first off night offensively at the MLS Is Back Tournament is kind of offset by this gritty defensive effort that saw them through. And then when the goal is scored off of Nani's corner kick to John Moutinho's header where he beats Harvey, it's hard because it happens on a substitute, so you know it's not an exhaustion issue. You know the team is suffering from an exhaustion issue, but you know they were almost there. And then, you know, I'll say it again, there is no justice in penalty kicks. So Orlando City were able to move on because Jordan Harvey put his attempt off the crossbar, but LAFC were very close to, you know, despite all their issues, despite all of their frustrations, advancing. So I think it's difficult to look back in retrospect and say that there are things that they could have done better, things that they could have done worse, because at the end of the day, they were moments away from, despite all of their deficiencies in that match, moving on. How close they came is both the hardest part to accept of their elimination, but also kind of the biggest positive you can take away from their elimination.
I don't know that I have much more to expand on than that. I think that you have to watch their defensive play the rest of the way. See if how it sort of shook out in Orlando. Similar to season 1 or more similar to season 2. What are we going to get now the rest of the way? Because if they're going to give up late goals, if they're going to sort of melt down, and I don't think that's really the right way to phrase it, but if they squander leads that they've earned, you can't just rely on scoring goals. Scoring goals is hard. They're going to get them, but they're not going to always come. And, I think sort of the expectation that they've developed for themselves, sort of the reputation, maybe needs to be tempered a little bit. LAFC could just be another team in this league as opposed to the team that we thought was sort of coming, this powerhouse. That stuff needs to be written, and it's too early to really say. I just think falling short again, you can find 1,000 excuses, short rest, heat, whatever. I mean, you still have to go out there and compete. You did it for 90 minutes to give up that late goal to João Moutinho. I don't know. It felt like sort of a wasted experiment, a waste of time. And then, like Carlos wasn't there. So then you sort of just shrug it off like, well, we weren't really, if you're from an LAFC supporter perspective or you're in that locker room, you're probably feeling like, oh, we didn't have our best anyways. But that's, you play with the team you got. And I think they could have done better. But again, they didn't. So, we'll see. We'll see how the rest of the season shakes out. This is kind of not a lost season, but a bewildering season. And I don't know that you can really take anything away from whether they win or lose this year or anybody else. So just to get out there and compete's fine. But, there was a winner, there was a champion, and it wasn't LAFC.
Yeah, and MLS is always known for its strange scheduling, the afternoon kickoffs and hot places. I mean, there's so many things about the normal MLS season that are already a little bit at odds with what we would call like the world football tradition of like playing on the weekends, usually on the same times as the other opponents. You have a crown champion at the end that's not in a tournament format. So many things about MLS are different. I think that this year is even different by MLS's standards, obviously with all the restrictions. And to Bob Bradley's credit, I think that today, for instance, when he spoke to the media, he said quite simply, he's like, we just need to have more shutouts. We need to, and he spoke specifically about first reactions. He said, when it comes to defending, and again, they defend as a whole team, not just the forward players in the back or the left back in the case that I was describing. Anyone, those first reactions is what Bob really wanted to focus on, because, the person who's reacting first to a play or the ball, that person's the cue for others to now react. And so if that reaction's delayed or if it's off or if it's mistimed, then it's sort of like a domino effect and plays break apart. And that's where you can see a team, really be able to pick apart LAFC or find a moment like you do in the corner kick where the reaction just wasn't fast enough. So to his credit, it sounds like he's identified things that were useful to learn from the experience where it wasn't, a total waste in that sense. They didn't lift the trophy, but there was things to learn from. It's something Bob perpetually talks about. But, quickly, let's hit some news before we talk about, the forthcoming game on the weekends. A few big things happened in the past week, actually. Tom Penn, obviously the president of LAFC since its inauguration, has stepped down from his president role. He'll be with the club in an advisory position. But he's going to move on, and I believe he's founded a company that develops personal protective gear. He makes the masks that most MLS and NBA teams, or this company, I believe, makes the masks that most of those teams have been wearing. So he's going into a more business-oriented space in that sense, but it sounds like he'll stay on an advisory role. I know the three of us have all had lots of interactions with Tom and conversations with Tom. I don't think anyone could look at everything he did and not be spellbound just by the amount of things that this club was able to do from nothing to where it is now. And we obviously wish him the best on season pass, but I wanted to hear if you guys had anything to add about Tom's time with LAFC. And for me, this was an unexpected thing that happened, but with Larry Friedman and John Thorrington taking on that co-president's role with the club moving forward, we all know that they've built something that that should withstand changes in personnel and changes in personnel even at the top. So I'm curious to hear, what you guys think about that and whether it's going to have an effect on LAFC in the near or long term.
I don't think it's going to have a negative effect on the team. I think that Tom leaves the team in excellent hands and excellent condition. You're right. In all the times that we've spoken to him, he's often spoken about, the game that he walked into in Portland with his kids and seeing the atmosphere there and thinking that something like that was, replicable in the LA market outside of the Galaxy. And you take him from that point in Portland, Oregon to this point now where he's stepping away from his president's role with the team. And, I don't think there are too many people that you would name as more integral to the birth and nascent years of LAFC. And, he's been there for a lot of victories. He one last defeat, which ironically sees that same Portland Timbers team crowned champions of the MLS Is Back Tournament as he steps away. But, LAFC is obviously something that came partly from his mind and his heart in terms of seeing what could be and understanding the potential and the current and future landscape of the LA sports market. LAFC was lucky to have him, remain lucky to have him in that advisory role. And I don't think that he's ever been the kind of guy to curtail himself into one lane. He's always talking about if you're not evolving, you're dying. So, Tom Penn here continues to evolve.
Yeah, I think it's obviously I don't know what he's thinking. Tom Penn seems to be a guy who has his hands in 1,000 different things, always working, always thinking, always moving. He's a hustler, but in the best kind of way. And, I do think it's interesting timing. Hopefully we won't need masks forever and PPE forever. So to sort of go off on do this venture, felt like he still is part of the club, still would be advising and things like that. But to step away as president, he had a huge hand in the formation of this club and the early direction of the club and how it listened to the community and the supporters, and obviously his experiences in Portland and being around the Timbers and the effect it had on creating this opportunity in Los Angeles for him. Seems like a lot to walk away from. So curious by it, but he's a guy of many talents and many motivations and many interests. And I doubt we won't see him around LAFC, just not to the degree that he would. And we did earlier. And, I think from the soccer side, John Thorrington and his crew certainly have done a nice job. And I think from the business side, the stadium operations side, they've kind of got it down. Maybe he felt like the crew was in place to handle his departure and he could focus elsewhere. So he in some ways was the heart and soul, and that's not entirely true, but he sort of gave this current of energy consistently with a smile and a passion that I think may be hard to replace on an individual level from the top of the club. And I do think he'll be missed if he's not around as often as he was.
Very true. And yeah, well, time will tell. I do think he surrounded himself with great people, and we wish Tom definitely all the best going forward. He's always been, very cordial with us and willing to talk about basically anything we want to. So, in addition to Tom, we've also got Adama Diomande, who left the MLS Is Back Tournament early. He with an injury, and he ended up parting ways with LAFC. We know that there's been sort of some personal things with Dio. Obviously, last year he checked himself into the league's sort of center for mental health, and the program, I should say, not a center. The program to sort out some of those things. And we are aware that, in a large part, it comes from wanting to be closer to his family, and his family is not here in full here in California. And so he's going to seek to be closer to them in a club there. And it sounds like their departure was mutual. But yeah, Dio, the third top scorer in LAFC club history, the scorer of the first hat trick, the guy who, put the dagger into the Galaxy in the playoffs last year, number 99, a very popular figure in the North End. He's no longer going to be with the club going forward. And we all know that they've got a lot of attacking weapons, and Bradley Wright Phillips has proven how suited he is to perform this season. But guys, did you want to add anything quick about Dio before we get into the Galaxy game and sort of your reading of what it'll mean that he's now leaving?
Adama Diomande is one of those players that's always been really generous with his time, especially you and me, Dweez, over at the training fields, giving us a lot of great conversations, and not just, 5-10 minutes with the media like he has to, but sat down for us for, upwards of half an hour, around an hour, talked everything from politics, religion, to music, to football with us. And then on the field, obviously, as you say, he has many accolades in a short time within LAFC's short history. I think the team is prepared to replace what they're losing on the field, but I also think that he's, given his tenure with the team and how long he's been a member of the club, they're definitely losing a little bit of that leadership inside of the locker room. Luckily for them, LAFC used MLS Is Back as an opportunity to kind of work on gaining those bits of leadership from many, many points in the club, whether veteran or youthful. He's obviously been a part of building all of that, helping guys like Edward Atuesta and Mark Anthony Kaye step into their own as one of the veteran members of this relatively young team. His contributions on and off the field, they haven't been unnoticed. They're extremely valued, and I'm sure he'll be missed by the community, but he has to do what he feels is best for himself and his family in this extremely uncertain time. So you can certainly understand the decision, and obviously LAFC has worked in the past with players who are looking to depart for various reasons, and making sure that they have as cordial a jettison or as cordial a departure as possible. And that trend continues here with Diomande, and, deservedly so.
Yep.
On Adama, look, he was a dangerous player. Unfortunately, sort of up and down, inconsistent, injuries, and, emotional guy, but interesting to be around. Always seemed to be not on edge, but always have an edge to him. And I think he brought passion, a lot of energy. He wasn't just a goal scorer; he facilitated, brought a quality, I think, to the club. Nice identification of talent. Someone that really people wouldn't have thought of coming to MLS. Bob knew him from their time together. And that relationship meant a lot. I think his relationship with Bob certainly was one of the reasons he was successful here. So more power to him wherever he goes, whatever he does. Hope he's happy and healthy, and his family are well. And, LAFC fans have a lot of memories of Adama Diomande. He was fun to watch. And I think that's the thing I take away most from him. He was a fun player to watch.
He did tell me once that his favorite Tupac album of all time was Me Against the World. And he sometimes had that attitude when he played, and sometimes had that attitude, with how he looked at the world in his career. And I thought it's helpful for a striker to have that sort of hunger. And you could really see it when he was locked in. He was just such a dangerous player. And I did want to add that Latif Blessing during the presser today sort of spoke to his relationship with Dio, and how Dio told Latif before he left, like how much he wanted Latif to keep working hard, how much he wanted the team to keep pushing and to go win the championship. And Latif and Dio had a special connection as he had with Bob, who sort of was a father figure type to him. And it's never easy, I think, in this club, which they fasten relationships that are quite close together, for players to leave. But like Ryan said, it's happened before; it'll happen again. And on that note, we also have Mohamed Traore, who is a Senegalese center back who's played for the U17s, who came out of the same academy that Monday Etim. Shout out to Alicia Rodriguez from Angels on Parade, who pointed that out in her piece about it. Monday Etim was the second player ever signed by LAFC. The same training academy in Florida produced this player, Mohamed Traore, Senegalese native. He's coming to LAFC. He's going to be part of this younger crop, defensive option, as he gets integrated with Bob's system. We all know that takes time. I don't foresee him starting on Saturday or anything, but that was a signing that LAFC has made in this period. The other big news is just that they have this 6-game stretch that we've alluded to. MLS is sort of thinking about this in terms of 18 games that they hope that they can get in 6, 6, and 6. They've only announced the first 6 so far. They're going to happen for LAFC over the next 3 weeks, basically 2 games a week. 3 are at home. There's going to be a visit to Seattle, to Salt Lake, and to, I believe, the Galaxy.
Yes.
And so those 3 matches are kind of come right up. 1 weekend, 1 midweek game. The Galaxy game at the Bank of California is going to be the first one. And, of course, Carlos Vela is going to finally be back. He brought up in his press conference today he hasn't played since March, and that's a long time for a player, probably the longest he's been in his career, I would imagine, without actually playing a competitive match. And what struck me today when he was talking, guys, was Carlos has been convicted every season of LAFC. The first season was sort of like convicted to sort of like be here in Los Angeles and show that he cared and tried. From the beginning of the second season, he said he wanted to be the MVP, and he scored more goals than anyone ever had, and he was the MVP. There was no parsing his words today. He was 100% about winning the title, to the point where I was kind of like, it almost didn't seem like it matters how LAFC gets to the playoffs. Like, the point isn't even the Supporters' Shield this season, which is going to be screwy anyways because teams can't even play each other in the same respect that they have in MLS seasons past. He just seemed really dead focused on that and knowing what that was like, something Mark Anthony Kaye also spoke to in the weeks since losing to Orlando, just this mentality within the group that, they want to have that grit that Portland was able to have for this tournament, that what it takes to win a tournament, something we have not seen from LAFC. And guys, Carlos is back. He's got that kind of attitude. And I wanted to just kind of get your take about what it means to have him going into this match against the Galaxy.
On the short term, you take into account how well LAFC did offensively at the MLS Is Back Tournament, and you take into account the fact that Vela hasn't played since March, and you know that there's going to be some, not growing pains, but a transitionary period where he's kind of working his way back into the offense. I don't think that there's a need to put too much pressure on him and have it run through him because, Brian Rodriguez and Diego Rossi and Bradley Wright Phillips did play so well at the tournament. Obviously, Vela is the MVP. He's the captain. He's LAFC's talisman. But in the long term, I think it speaks to exactly what you just said. It doesn't really matter how the regular season shakes out. If LAFC have a place in the postseason gauntlet, that's going to be where all of their attention is. And they want to lift the trophy this year. I think kind of putting a bow on the unfinished business from last year's, premature elimination in the Western Conference Final. But I think that regardless of what happens on the field against the Galaxy on Saturday, LAFC is adding the most dangerous player in the league back to what was the most dangerous offense at the tournament. It's difficult to find a negative in that outside of the fact that they have to get him back up to speed. And they don't necessarily have to rush to do that again because of the state of the guys that have played more recently.
Yeah, no negative with Carlos Vela returning. Only the best player in the league who's going to put a ton of pressure on opposing teams, and they're going to have to worry about him, and then that frees up other players on the LAFC side to create havoc. So, you get a guy like that who not only is obviously turned into a tremendous leader for the team and now saying all the right things about wanting to win, but the productivity is undeniable. And you look at you look, they should win this league. They should win this league. And I think if they don't have Carlos Vela, there's a lot of people already picking them to be very competitive. With Carlos Vela, you have to make them the favorite. So that there's pressure there. I think acknowledging the need to win, the desire to win is in recognition of that pressure, which is a good thing. They feel, I think, that they have to live up to that. And if it doesn't happen this year, and if they fall short, then I think you start getting into questions. Do you retain Carlos Vela? Is it worth it? Do you move on from him? Do you bring in other players? How long do you hold on to Carlos? I think not winning adds all sorts of questions they don't want to deal with. But clearly he's the best player in the league. He was last year. There's no reason to think that he wouldn't be this year. Incredible distributor and finisher. And he brings that quality that, like, when things are not going right, if they're not happening within the system, he's a guy who can make it happen on his own. So that's always a huge weapon to have. And his return, I'm sure, is welcome from every facet of the club.
I think you're spot on with that. There's no downside to getting him back. And he said today again that they're so close to winning a trophy, and he said it in a way that makes it seem like he's convinced of that. And when you have someone like him convicted and on board, it's obviously a huge boost. Speaking of people being back on board, it sounds like Chicharito and Jonah Dos Santos are going to be both available for the Galaxy. They're two most important players for sure, even though Chicharito has not really given the kind of performances so far in his short MLS career that people expected. But we might get a chance to see all of these big pieces on the field at one time this Saturday, which is going to be really exciting. Of course, Bank of California Stadium will be empty. Of course, there's a ton of other sort of subplots going on in this one, and obviously the fact that LAFC put 6 goals past the Galaxy in Orlando is something that's got to still be in their heads, and the rivalry games always being important, something that sort of everyone talked about today. And I just quickly, the Adrian Perez has also returned for LAFC and is back to normal training. And Andy Nahar, who played some time in Orlando, is going to be available, but probably not going to start. He's not quite there. And of course, they have their 3 academy players who've gotten into the first team now, also available for selection. So it's a full menu of options for Bob to pick from, which is going to be good from his end. It sounds like their neighbors down in Carson have the same sort of thing going on, and at least we'll get to see a good game of football on a good pitch in a I don't want to say it's non-hot, but non-absurdly humid situation that you had in Orlando. Guys, any last things to say about this one? It's a 3 p.m. West Coast time kickoff on Saturday. Any last words about that?
Just from those objective standpoint of wanting to see a good, high-quality match, it's good that Jonah Dos Santos and Chicharito are back for the Galaxy. From LAFC's perspective, I think this is probably the LA Derby that they're going into with the least amount of pressure in quite a while. They can either revel in that, or it can be something that kind of causes them to lose focus. I don't expect the latter to be the case coming off of the MLS Is Back tournament the way they did. But there's certainly I don't think there's as much sense of we need to beat this team specifically as there is the same desire to get 3 points that LAFC take into every match. I think that could actually be a boost for them, that there aren't so many kind of side storylines going into this match as there has been in the past. But really for LAFC, this is their first opportunity to play at full strength since the freeze, since Vela wasn't in Orlando. They should take advantage and, get back to work toward trying to win that trophy that they all say they're so close to getting.
Yeah, look, I mean, that last game was an absolute wipeout. And, this avalanche that sort of occurred in Orlando, I think people are going to be expecting something similar. And so that may kind of create the conditions for not living up to expectations. And certainly if they don't get 3 points, I think that's a big deal in this match. The Galaxy have probably been thinking about that 6-2 scoreline every second since it happened. And knowing now that the LAFC match is the first one they get back is sort of like they try to get this regular rotation. They have to be fired up. So I think it's just another incarnation of the LA Derby, which has been wild in every single sense. And I don't think this is going to be any different. Unfortunate and weird to have it be in the bank with no fans, no 3-2-5-2, no Galaxy supporters. So the atmosphere that we've all come to expect and really enjoy won't be there. In Orlando, you got it. It made sense. No one had any kind of semblance of a home field experience. But here, what's it going to be like in an empty Bank of California Stadium? Is it still Bank of California Stadium? Didn't they change that? Or is it still Bank of California Stadium?
I think it's still Bank of California Stadium for one more season maybe, and then the sponsorship might run out. One last thing I was going to quickly point out is there's still a regular season table after all, and 3 of those games in Orlando, the group games, counted towards that. And LAFC is sitting right now 4th, looking up at Portland, Minnesota, and then Sporting Kansas City at the top with 9 points. The Galaxy is all the way at the bottom with just 2 points so far this season, and they have yet to win a game. They're actually the only team below them is Miami, the expansion team down in Florida. So it'll be an interesting kind of restart to the season for both of these teams, I'm sure, and they'll both want to get points. So again, that game is going to be 3 p.m. Saturday. We'll be watching along. I'll be at the stadium covering it for the good people of Los Angeles. So Ryan Wallerson, Josh Gross.
You will be at the game?
I will, yes.
Okay.
Yes,
I'll
be.
First one that I'm watching on TV. So looking forward to seeing it. Well, other than the Orlando match, obviously.
That'll be the first one I'm watching on TV, Orlando included.
Yeah.
So I'll be the representative for the three of us for this one, and we'll enjoy it, and we'll be back with you guys for another episode somewhere in between these next matches. So peace.